We're surrounded by beauty products that promise to nourish, revitalize, detoxify, even transform our skin and hair. And the words sound enticing, but do they actually mean anything? Because behind every cosmetic claim sits a fine line between marketing creativity and regulatory reality. And too often, beauty brands blur that line. And part of the problem lies in habit. So for decades, if not centuries, the beauty industry has relied on adjectives to sell products, and consumers have been conditioned to expect them. So think about anti-aging or chemical-free or even clean. These phrases are repeated so often that they almost lose their meaning. Yet for formulators and brand founders, they carry a risk, a legal risk, an ethical risk, a reputational risk. And the result is an industry that sometimes overpromises, underdelivers, and leaves customers thoroughly confused. And then at the same time, we've seen the rise of green beauty and sustainability has opened up a new chapter of claims. So think about free from, natural, eco, green, sustainable. These types of claims can be even harder to substantiate than the ones about performance of the product. So what do we really mean when we talk about cosmetic claims? What's allowed? What's misleading? What needs to change? So in today's episode, we're going to dig into the world of claims, the dangers of relying on adjectives, and how brands can communicate results without overpromising. Welcome to Green Beauty Conversations, in which I challenge the beauty industry to become sustainable, champion independent and green beauty, and encourage you to join me in making beauty better. I'm your host, Lorraine Dallmeier. I'm a chartered environmentalist, biologist, and the CEO of award-winning online organic cosmetic formulation school, Formula Botanica. We have tens of thousands of students in over 190 countries around the world who study with us to become organic beauty formulators and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com to try our free online formulation course. And if you want to be the first person to know what's happening in green beauty, make sure you subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app. So in today's episode, I'm joined by Theresa Callaghan, a PhD biochemist with more than 37 years of international experience in the cosmetics industry. After a postdoctoral fellowship at the Pasteur Institute, she built her career in corporate skincare research before founding Callaghan Consulting International in 2008, where she advises brands and ingredient suppliers on cosmetic claims and scientific innovation. She's also the author of the multilingual book, Help, I'm Covered in Adjectives, Cosmetic Claims and the Consumer, which is now in its second edition and has pride of place on my bookshelf. And she also serves on the editorial board of the International Journal of Cosmetic Science and contributes regularly to Eurocosmetics magazine, LinkedIn, and Beauty Streams. She's an active member of professional societies, including the UK and Scandinavian Society of Cosmetic Scientists and the British Herbal Medical Association. And Theresa has long been recognised as a leading industry voice, so I'm thrilled that she's here today. Hi, Theresa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Lorraine. And thank you very much for inviting me on your show today.
Oh, I'm really pleased you're here. Your book has been on my bookshelf for many years, so it's a full circle moment. Let's start with some introductions, though. Could you please introduce yourself for our listeners?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Theresa Callaghan, and I own Callaghan Consulting International, and I specialize in claims development, and this is where we help brands and ingredient suppliers develop their claims and to meet compliance with the cosmetic legislation.
Excellent. Now, some people might be sat there going, what on earth is that? So let's, I think, go back to basics. What exactly is a cosmetic claim?
Right. A cosmetic claim is something, it's a tool. It's a tool that you use in which to sell your product and make, hopefully, pots of money for you and a successful business to boot. But within that tool, obviously, there are words, pictures, design, anything also sensorial that can provide some intimacy with the consumer when they pick up that product and therefore buy it. And so it is the text, from the legal point of view, it's the text, the names, the pictures, the graphs, anything that you just basically put down in writing or photograph or anything that is judged as a claim. So it is quite complex. So it's not just the wording on the sentence, it's everything. And as I said, it is then a tool collectively in which you use to sell your product.
Yes, and I suppose a lot of this dates back to the history of cosmetics. I mean, it's a topic that I absolutely adore, actually. And when you look through these old history books and you see these adverts of the crazy things that people used to claim.
Oh, yes.
I suppose that's
the bar of soap that washes away fat, that from 1925, La Mer beauty soap. And I just thought, oh gosh, and now we are injecting ourselves instead to lose weight. But yes, claims, because advertising is claims at the end of the day. Some of the things that you see especially on TV are even now today, every time I see an Axe, the Lynx ad, I just shiver and I'm just thinking, has anybody actually noticed that? Is this going to make it? But yes, claims and they always focus on women, don't they?
They do. Yes. Well, the beauty industry is great at making women feel really inadequate.
Oh, yes.
And telling them they're inadequate until they buy their products.
Yes. Selling anxiety is yes. Our number one forte. Definitely. And we should be ashamed of it, to be honest.
Agreed. But that's maybe a podcast for another time. In fact, I've covered that a few times on the podcast, but it's a topic I think that never tires. But let's get back to claims, because obviously there's a reason that we now have legislation that cosmetic claims knowledge is a thing, because of course we have this crazy history of the beauty industry. Hasn't entirely gone away necessarily, but what can and can't brands now say about their cosmetics from a high level perspective?
Oh, from a high level perspective, you have to avoid at all costs health and medical related claims, because at the end of the day, those are governed by the drugs legislation and medical devices. And so you really do need to be very careful that you don't use, shall we say, medical terminology in the story that you tell and even in your brand name. So you have to stay away from words like anti-inflammatory and acne and healing. And whilst we can use these terms sort of, business to business as industry insiders, we have to use a completely different language when we are speaking with the consumers. And this is where we tend to fall down at times, because it's very easy because a lot of this medical language is scientific language. And of course, as scientists, we just talk about it all the time without really considering what we are saying. And so it's then when you've got the piece of paper in front of you and what you want to give to the copywriter is then a different kettle of fish altogether. So yes, that's the biggest thing that you have to stay away from. And of course is to also stay away from demeaning the competition and demeaning ingredients that are legally permitted. And in general, just don't mislead the consumer. That's the biggest thing.
And this actually brings me to a question I wanted to ask you later on, but as you've touched on the medical aspect, I think it's an interesting one to put forward. So obviously, the beauty industry is made up of a myriad of different sizes of brands. We have the cosmetic giants, we have the indie brands. They all fall foul of claims issues from time to time. But a lot of the indie brands, who of course we work with at Formula Botanica, they start their brands because they genuinely care about skin health. And you can see where I'm going with this already.
Absolutely.
They're not driven necessarily by the vanity or appearance or wanting to make people feel inherently bad about themselves, which is obviously how the beauty industry has been historically set up. A lot of these indie brands and their founders come into this from the perspective of genuine care and well-being. But that then clashes massively with what you can and can't say about cosmetics, because you're not allowed to talk about healing, treating, the medical side. So how can brands navigate that tension?
Yes, I think by finding alternative wording is obviously the easier one, and then perhaps focusing more on the deliverable benefit and also the skin need, if it's skincare or if it's hair care, rather than just saying, oh, this moisturizer will treat eczema. It might well treat eczema. Don't get me wrong. A lot of products out there that would help manage the condition. So they are, in a way, adjunct products to any pharmaceutical preparation that you might be taking as well. But it's how you steer around that. It is possible. They shouldn't feel despondent or give up. There are ways to do that. And as long as everything that you present for what you want to say is clear, it's transparent, and it complies with all 6 of the criteria, then you shouldn't have a problem.
And just for clarification, those 6 criteria are the ones that are set in the EU, right? So they don't necessarily apply worldwide, or do they?
They apply in the UK because the UK took them over. To a certain extent, they apply elsewhere. Because if you take the world collectively, I hope we're not digressing too much here.
It's all good.
All legislators worldwide want cosmetic products to be honest, truthful, legal. It is all the 6 criteria, but they just approach it in a different way. And the requirements to achieve compliance of each of these perhaps takes different routes, or perhaps some is less stringent. And this is why the EU, and of course I include the UK in here, are considered, the central standard for that. But yes, when you have, for example, like the USA, I feel sorry for these guys. It took 80 years to upgrade their legislation. And so there is still some digesting to do of what that upgrade is and how does it harmonize with the rest of the world.
And again, that's a whole separate podcast. I actually printed out the documentation for MOCRA the other day. It only filled about 10 pages. It's not very helpful. It's not very prescriptive. So I suppose brands around the world could maybe go and read those 6 criteria, because it's very easy to digest, actually. And we include this in our courses at Formula Botanica as well. Anyway, we digress. Tell me about your book. It's called Help, I'm Covered in Adjectives. I've had it on my shelf since it was published, but let's talk about what's in it and why you wrote it.
Right. Help, I'm Covered in Adjectives, Cosmetic Claims in the Consumer was originally written back in 2019 with the first edition. And this book came about because I had been asked to write it by many of the delegates who attended my In Cosmetics workshops that I held every year at In Cosmetics prior to COVID. And also a number of customers, myself, said, is there something central that we could have all together? So I discussed it with a couple of, shall we say, like-minded colleagues, and they said, do it. So I wrote the first edition, and in some respects, I felt quite pressured to get this book out. And so that came out in 2019. And so no sooner as I got the book out, I realized this book needs a second edition. And so I worked on that. So the second edition, which is primarily why we're here today, that is, in essence, the first book, but it's updated to include more on, shall we say, for example, case studies. I've also widened the subject of green, and also any changes in the legislation. And I also brought in a chapter to cover misinformation. So who are the culprits? Obviously, we in the industry are. The role of the consumer, the influencer, the journalist, and a couple of others. And I also widen the scope for extra bibliography at each end of the chapter. But the book, I wanted to write it in an engaging way, because when I was researching for the chapter on misinformation, with obviously the consumer and the influencer, and to a certain extent the journalist, they are on the other side of the counter. We're on the lab side. They are on the consumer side. And so I needed a book that would, or an approach that would bridge that gap between buying a cosmetic product and creating and selling it. I believe that I've actually been quite successful on that. At least that's what the feedback's been. So, and it's written in a way that hopefully engages the person, whether you are in the industry or whether you're outside the industry, to think about what a claim is, why they are being made, how they are being developed, and also the complexity that's involved in putting a cosmetic product on the market in the first place. So this was the reason why. And so, yes, the second edition has been out for less than a year. I've had some very interesting discussions with other podcasters. Sure. And also I found that, certainly male consumers, it was a real eye-opener for them because
really?
So cosmetics aren't makeup then.
Oh my goodness.
That was the biggest one. And they're saying, no, makeup is part of cosmetics.
Well, we'll include the links to your book below in the show notes. So if anyone does want to go and buy a copy, yeah.
So anyway, yes, that was the reason why that with the workshops that I was giving on claims development, there was a need to have something solid that could fit with them, that would last.
One conversation that I've seen perpetuated over the last, longer than a decade really, is I've seen a lot of cosmetic chemistry influencers and chemists online who are often, they seem like quite angry people, if I'm going to be honest. And I don't know why they're so angry. They need to take a chill pill, in my opinion. But they often rant a lot about the claims made by indie beauty brands. Because, of course, many of the smaller brands, like we talked about earlier, they come into this very much from a well-being and health perspective. And then they fall foul of that claims legislation. But it's not just the small brands who are getting this wrong, is it? I mean, you talked about Axe earlier. So let's talk about the big brands and why they're doing this, because they definitely can afford to get this right.
Yes, and often if you run through the Advertising Standards Authority's website, you find there are an awful lot of big brands in there sort of being challenged on what they say. But yes, it's everyone. Everyone in the industry has the potential to be compliant and successful or just, trip over on their faces. Absolutely. That there are different reasons that they do fall down. It can be commercial pressure. It can be just marketing pressure. It can be lack of innocence. It could be just innocent not knowing. And as long as they're not wearing perhaps their ignorance as a badge of honor, then it's forgivable. But yes, it's true. And I think also a lot has to do with, because we are a saturated market, too many ingredients. And so everybody wants to stick their tree higher than the other tree in the jungle. And so there is the temptation to go out on a limb. And if you just take the Lynx Axe ads, whilst there is a lot of, there's some hyperbole in there, which is permitted, there is also a certain amount of implication because you mustn't imply something that isn't true. And whilst you can laugh at these ads, some people don't. They find them quite offensive. We have to be very careful. And if you remember Lux, which is part of Unilever, sort of the major shareholder of Unilever, slapped them down, was it last year, over a claim that using the soap will wash away sexism. So what does that have to do with the product?
That makes me quite angry to hear that, actually, that someone made that claim. Yes, that's not okay.
No, it isn't. And the other thing also is you find certainly with some of the mainstream brands is that are they activists or are they cosmetic brands? That there seems to be a blurring of that in some quarters of the industry.
It must be the case in every sector where some brands take on more of that mantle. It's an interesting one because the one claim that isn't outlawed is, of course, the one that makes people feel terrible about themselves. And the big brands are great at that. So I'll be interested to see if we ever update our claims legislation to include that. Personally, I would lobby for that because I think it would change the beauty industry fundamentally.
I would like to lobby for beauty apps and ingredient apps to be controlled under the same 6 criteria.
Yeah, I understand. Because, of course, people are scanning things. Well, let's come on to that. Do you think then that consumers help or hinder with cosmetics claims and getting it right?
Both. I'd say both because today's consumer is more and more online. As we know, the shopping streets centres are doing less well than they used to. And as a result of that, and of course the rise in social media, the consumer now has a much louder voice than they used to. And so it means then that they are able to call out more and ask more questions. Well, what do you mean? Why about this? And so that in itself is a valuable source of information for the industry. But at the same time, there are two things. One, the internet is global, and so shopping is global. We can search all over the world to look at cosmetic products. Whether we can buy from them is a different matter, but we have that facility. And so therefore, also then with the different types of legislation as well, and, Europe having more ingredients that are banned than, say, the USA, all that it is influencing the consumer, but it's also driving then misinformation, especially when your average consumer, whilst they might be, shall we say, circumspect, if you like, they may not have, degrees in chemistry or toxicology, for example. And so if they see an ingredient that they can't pronounce the name of, it has to be toxic, and when you try to explain to them, well, here's the breakdown of all the chemicals in a banana or a lemon, they're taken aback. And in many respects, whilst we moan, and I do it too, I confess here, because it does get up my back a bit, where the consumers do cause a lot of noise. You have to sift through that noise. But at the same time, they are a valuable source of information because of the feedback that they are given, and also because of the types of questions they're asking. It's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And for anyone listening, I recorded a podcast episode on this actually back in 2021. It's episode 63, and it's on how parabens kickstarted the indie beauty movement. It is fascinating to look at how misinformation amplified by the mainstream media caught wind. And then the bit that fascinated me was how poorly the mainstream industry responded to it.
Oh, it was late, and it was too, the language used was too, well, I suppose we would say wishy-washy, and they should have just been up front and just said,
and
no,
they need a way of being able to speak to the consumer that doesn't feel dry, a bit lectury.
Yes.
Do you think the mainstream industry has what it takes to get the consumer on board with cosmetic claims?
We do. We just don't make better use of it. We certainly, when we are communicating with the consumer, we rely heavily on, the consumer interface people. And I think that the science, when you hear some scientists speak, they are so engaging, and you just think you should be talking to the consumer. And okay, maybe I shouldn't say names on here, but certainly one person who really does that well has to be Professor Paul Matz.
Okay, well, we'll go look him up.
Really does know how to engage. Ex-P&G, he's just retired now, but he still works in the industry because he also lectures as part of the cosmetic courses available in the UK.
I'll go look him up and see if he can come on the podcast. How's that?
If you can get Paul on a podcast, you will not be disappointed at all.
Let's move on, and I'll see what I can do there. So what can brands do in order to get this right? I mean, you said earlier, there are ways of going about this. What we've always said at Formula Botanica is fall back onto euphemisms and, break out the thesaurus and try and find other ways of saying it without falling foul. But it's so hard.
Oh, yes. To be compliant, obviously you need to have a grasp of what the criteria are asking for you. Then go into my book and it's all laid out there. But certainly is the first question that you should be asking is, why am I putting this product on the market? What are my objectives? And yes, I know how it feels when somebody's got, this wonderful idea for a project. They're going to put it out. And it's a bit like me with the book. You become very attached to it. It's your baby and you want it to thrive. but you still have to break it down to the nitty gritty. Why? So why am I putting this product on the market? What am I offering that is over and above what's out there already? Or am I just putting a photocopy product out?
And what most indie beauty brand founders would say in response to that is, I'm putting this product on the market because I know it helps people with their skin health. And that's where we fundamentally come full circle again, and we clash right into those cosmetic claim requirements.
Yes. And you probably find that just about every other cosmetic product on the market out there does exactly the same, sadly. So once you've really challenged yourself on why you want to put this product on the market, and if you're still convinced, then you have to do your homework and put the effort in to create a formulation with the right ingredients set against the benefits and the objectives that you want to achieve, and then work with the team with regulatory testing and marketing in order to create the messaging and then have that messaging substantiated.
Can you share any examples of any brands that you've worked with in the past where you've helped them strip away those adjectives and what happened as a result?
Yes, I have to be careful because of confidentiality here. But yes, there was, they're very successful, by the way. It's brilliant that they were a tiny little brand selling a hair product for the scalp. They came to me because they just launched the product and they wanted to write up their clinical study. And when I saw it, I said, either you take the product off the market or you don't write the paper, right? I said, we have to start again. And they were terrified, but luckily the CEO was actually a lawyer. So he knew that, and he had the common sense to have a scientific advisory board on board who agreed with me. And so we worked together to take the best out of the study that they'd already done. I said, look, we'll present this study as a proof of principle, right? Just don't show the photographs because the photographs apparently were terrible. I said, you take the photographs out. We'll just stick with the data and we can create a nice proof of principle. Okay. But you still have to run the big study. But of course, marketing wanted to push for these claims. And I said, right, we're going to have a meeting now with marketing. You get them on board. And he said, oh, this is going to be fun. But it was a fantastic meeting. Because R&D some say, oh, I don't know that I want marketing in my meeting. And then marketing say, oh, I don't want R&D in my meeting. And you just think, oh my goodness me, you have to when you need regulatory affairs in there as the referee, So, but anyway, the long and short of it was that yes, they had agreed that yes, the evidence that they had, whilst it was, beneficial, they needed something more robust, and they were successful in obtaining the finance to run the study. And they ran the study and they ran it on a lot more volunteers than I had proposed, which was even better. I think they ran it on 300 volunteers. And so much so that the results they got back not only correlated with their proof of principle study, great, but they also had some decent photography too. And the product also ended up in, although because it's a borderline product, they were able to not only sell it online, but also in the pharmacies. Okay.
So a great success story there.
But I have had some where they've been stripped back and they've had to go back to the drawing board.
I can imagine, because if ultimately your objective clashes with what you're allowed to say, then it does require you to revisit.
Yeah, and also I also find with some customers, when they come up with the concept of the product that they want to do, they've already got the launch date and they don't want to change.
That's very true.
You just think, no. You're going to have to turn the whole thing around a little bit.
I'm laughing because I've spoken to so many people over the years who, they want to take the course with us and then launch within 3 months, and we have to sort of talk them down off a high ledge. But One question I have for you actually is one thing I've seen over the years is that brands don't make any claims around, for instance, eczema. It's something you were talking about earlier, and it's a great example. But sometimes their customers do. And their customers will use a product and go, oh my God, it's healed my eczema. And they will then write that in those testimonials that brands have on their website. Now, we have a Trustpilot site, for instance, at Formula Botanica. We have over 2,000 5-star reviews, very proud of it. But we cannot modify those reviews. So what do you do when your customers actually fall foul of the claims legislation?
Right. Yes, because in some legislative quarters, because this is something I've talked about, is that you, in many respects, you're also responsible for what your customers are saying because they are making a claim about a product you have no evidence for. It's a bit like when, you see influencers online saying, oh, toothpaste got rid of my acne, but toothpaste was never designed for that. But you are also responsible for that. Now, yes, if the review went up, there's no way that you can actually stop that, take it off.
No, I mean, you have zero control over these external review sites. So I always find it fascinating because I have seen the regulators talk about this. And I know from experience that if someone wants to go and leave a review for us, unless it's derogatory or defamatory in some way, or unless they break the law with it, there is zero input from us. And I would imagine it's the same with beauty brands. I mean, if they get 200 reviews from people saying it's cured my eczema on an external review site, that's out there in the world and they can't touch that.
Yeah, if it's on an external site, yes, obviously you can't do that. But if it's on your own website, then you're going to need to take legal advice.
Yeah, I honestly don't think there's a way out of it. I think the regulators are just going to have to suck it up, to be honest.
Yeah, the regulators are going to have to look at this because at the end of the day, if there is a product out there and 200 people said, hey, this product cured or helped with my eczema, my acne or whatever, then there is value in that because it's a skin condition that needs as much help as possible. And if a cosmetic product can help in that direction, then yes, I think that certainly in the UK, you could seek advice from the MHRA. They're always very open and helpful. Well, most of the time. And so it's a complicated one.
I know I took us down a rabbit hole there, but it was one that's been fascinating me for many years. So I was interested to hear what you had to say on it. I suppose, I mean, in the past, many of our common claims have centered around what ingredients can do. A lot of brands talk about, my lavender is anti-inflammatory. You can't necessarily extrapolate that to the whole product. They've also talked about the absence of ingredients, the so-called free from claims. But now I feel that we're entering a whole new realm of cosmetic claims going down the greenwashing route. So do you think that the cosmetics industry treats greenwashing claims in the same way that it treats those cosmetic claims? Or does the cosmetics industry maybe not see greenwashing as its problem to solve?
I would say that the cosmetic industry knows that greenwashing is a problem. And legislation has come through both in the UK and here in the EU. But the problem that we have with the greenwashing and making sustainability claims and eco claims is that they can't be treated in isolation. In the same way when the 6 criteria came out back in 2013, was it back then? People at the time didn't realize that you can't treat them as 6 separate silos. If you're non-compliant with one, you're non-compliant with the lot. Everything is out. And in some respects with the sustainability claims, because you've got the 17 goals driven by the United Nations, and they are all linked. And so whilst you can prove that maybe your packaging is recyclable and that the majority of you're in a country that's really top notch in recycling, you could probably get away with that. But you also have to take into account, are the people who are recycling this stuff, is their health suffering because they're working with toxic chemicals in the plastic or something? And so greenwashing, I think, is going to be with us, or at least, shall we say, pushing greenwashing away. It's going to be with us for a while, because it's also claims washing as well. So because the free from claims are treated as claims washing because it's a cop out. And of course, the EU doesn't allow free from claims, even though some national bodies just turn a blind eye.
Oh yeah, it's very different in the US. I've found over the years the claims focus has very much been on what's in the product rather than what isn't. But I find it interesting that, I mean, obviously the greenwashing legislation that is emerging in Europe isn't cosmetic specific. It's, industry neutral, I suppose. But I will be interested to see if the cosmetic claims regulations eventually start to bring greenwashing elements in, or if they very much do see that as that's the responsibility of some other body over there.
Oh, yes. Somebody that you need to speak to is Mark Smith from Natural.
He's been on the podcast before, yes.
He's been on the podcast before.
No, we've got some great guests on here. It's a fascinating topic. And I also find it fascinating to watch the way that the US is effectively not legislating for it, but instead going down the route of the class action lawsuit, which I covered in a bunch of podcasts last year, actually.
Yes, I think the US will be slow, and because of their change in government, where they haven't put sustainability at the top of the list.
You've just worded that very politely. Let's not go down that rabbit hole, Theresa. It's okay.
No.
So I suppose final question is, what would you love to see the beauty industry do differently to get cosmetic claims right?
Stop putting Me Too products out there. That would be one. I think also as an industry, we should slow down and really put more investment into the innovation. And in order to do that, we need to dig deeper into what's going on in skin research and hair research and nails too. And to get it right, first and foremost, the law is the law. There it is, suck it up kind of thing. You have to do this. But also I think we need to be more transparent. We need to be more realistic about the expectations that we have about what we put in our products and create them. And also when we communicate with the consumer, sort of consumer education, we must be very clear and precise on what those expectations are so that they are better informed and, and so the opportunities for misinformation are markedly reduced. So I think, transparency, expectations, and certainly consumer communication education. I think that would be certainly the three key things I would like to look at.
Excellent. Yeah. Let's see how the beauty industry's marketing departments embrace those. But you're absolutely right. Yeah. There is a lot of work to do.
And one other thing, and it's highly controversial, right? So
let's end on that. I love it.
Yeah, because I put this up yesterday on LinkedIn, is in the same way drug development products are, the clinical trials are out in the public domain because the databases is, why don't we have them in the cosmetic industry? It would weed out all those Me Too brands. It would also then challenge for the robustness of the claims and the objectives, because we are such a competitive, consumer product driven industry. I think that's perhaps a bit idealistic, but it's certainly something to consider.
Absolutely. We can all try and change the beauty industry. I mean, it needs to have a fundamentally big shake-up, in my opinion. So finally, you have obviously written your book, Help Uncovered in Adjectives. You have another book, I believe, that's coming out in November. And you've also published your first fiction book, which is set in the cosmetics industry. Can you very briefly just talk us about your suite of literature?
Okay, the companion book to Help Uncovered in Adjectives coming out in November. This is called The Myth of the Cheap Study, and it certainly helps those in the industry or those entering the industry who are panicking about the costs of studies, and to explain why having robust evidence is an investment. So, but it's also written for investors interested in putting some money into the industry. the second book is where I decided, because I write a lot anyway in the non-fiction world, I decided to put my toe in the water and look at fiction. And so Pink Bobbit is the first book in a trilogy, set against the backdrop of a collapsed beauty industry. It's a thriller, and I've used our timeline to make it more thrilling and suspenseful. It's downright scary, to be honest. But it focuses on basically the Machiavellian kind of organization that arose out of the ashes of this collapsed beauty industry, and how this group led by Zoe Blaze, because it's the Zoe Blaze mysteries, is continually chasing after these and breaking them down and solving murders and goodness knows what else. But at the same time, I'm using my experience in the cosmetic industry to set scenarios, but it's fiction. Okay. So yes, the first one looks at dodgy formulations. The second one, it will be the ultimate dodgy clinical trial. And then the third one looks at AI in cosmetics. So yeah. Okay.
Well, you've heard it here. You've got both fiction and non-fiction to choose from. Theresa's written both, and they're all set in the cosmetics industry. And one may be slightly more fun than the other, but all will be very valuable to read. So Theresa, where can they read your books, and where can they buy them?
Right. My books are available on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. And if you go on to my own website, Callaghan Consulting International, so you just Google that, under the Claims Insights page, there's a drop-down menu, and there's a bit about all the books there and where you can.
Amazing. And you offer consulting services as well, don't you?
And I still offer consulting services, and I take each project on a case-by-case basis. And writing projects are a big part of my work, particularly for those whose first language is not English, and they would like somebody to write up their clinical study and help them get it published somewhere. So
we'll include all the links to those pages in our show notes, so do go and check out what Theresa's been up to and go and buy her books. Theresa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Lorraine. It's been really enjoyable, and thank you for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. Well, thanks so much, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. How do you feel about cosmetic claims? Which cosmetic claims have you seen brands make, which they maybe shouldn't have made? Leave us a comment on our social channels, as both the Formula Botanica team and I love hearing from you. And if you do want to hear more of the episodes about the topics that we discussed today, please do delve back into the podcast archives. So some great examples include episode 63. I even mentioned it earlier with Theresa, which was all about so-called parabenoia, where the rise of fear around parabens, I believe, really kickstarted the indie beauty and natural beauty movement. That was recorded all the way back in 2021. Do go and have a listen to it. And also episodes 219, 220, 221 and 222, which I recorded in 2024. And in those episodes, I looked at the shifting legal landscape for greenwashing claims, including the idea that the USA is effectively regulating these claims through class action lawsuits against cosmetics brands. This is a fascinating topic, and certainly one to look at in more detail if this interests you. There is a wealth of information in our old episodes anyway, so go back and listen to them, and I think you'll hopefully really enjoy them. Thank you for joining Theresa and I for this latest episode of Green Beauty Conversations. I hope you enjoyed this one too. If you did, please do leave us a 5-star review so that other people can enjoy these conversations as well. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever your favourite podcast app is. And stay tuned for the next episode. Follow Formula Botanica at Formula Botanica on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn, we're everywhere. And come and give me a follow at Lorraine Dallmeier on Instagram and LinkedIn. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com and sign up for our free online formulation course today.